Well, we finally got college football to talk about. A week zero that did not disappoint. Out of 5 games, three of the five, 60% of the college football FBS level that were on, ended up being a one-score game, including an FBS versus FCS matchup. This is going to be fun to rehash everything that happened yesterday and talk about some of these performances and actually have something on the football field to talk about. Make sure that you check me out over here on TikTok. Look up Bash's CFB Show. If you're new around here, my name is Colin Bashnagel, the host of Bash's College Football Show, where we are going to do deep dives in depth on a lot of these games, the biggest games of every single week. And this week, I'm going to touch on all five here in this video. So make sure you like the video if you love college football, and certainly subscribe if you want more of this content. So let's get straight into it with the Irish Farmageddon. We got Iowa State winning 24-21 over Kansas State. Result that didn't necessarily surprise me, but I was on the other side of this. Now, we did a segment called Walk That Line. We do it every single week. In fact, next week, I think I'm going to do it twice for the weekday games and then also Saturday, Sunday, Monday, separate it out a little bit. But we have our first technical upset of the college football season. Kansas State was favored by 3 coming into this game, and I just got to give a lot of props to both defenses. I thought both defenses played incredible. The Iowa State defensive line, was a big question mark in my mind, and they ended up shutting me up pretty quickly. They were really holding their own, stopping the run. It didn't help Kansas State that their starting running back, Dylan Edwards, got hurt on the punt return, in which we could rehash the punt return, the muff punt early in the game. I thought he should have called a fair catch, and he probably wouldn't have got hurt if he did. Of course, it's unfortunate what happened, and I'm not saying he deserved that or anything like that, but I certainly think he was a little bit juiced up. It was a good punt, held in the air for a while and carried, like it had to have been over 50 yards. And he was trying to make a play because he was juiced up. It was his first time to have an opportunity to make a play, and he ended up unfortunately getting hurt trying to make a play that wasn't there. Now, I got to give a lot of props to Rocco Becht, because even though his stat line, he completed 50% of his passes. I mean, number one, the whole first half was just a sloppy freaking mess. I kind of hate that this game was played in Ireland. I'm starting to get sick of these pretty important conference games being in Dublin, Ireland. I want it to be like a matchup like North Carolina and TCU for next year, because I think if you're going to get a sloppy mess, it's more likely in Ireland. I feel like every single game, it's wet, rainy, groggy, and sloppy. And like, for example, in hindsight, Georgia Tech was a much better team than Florida State, but that game honestly was closer than, in hindsight, it probably should have been. Well, Rocco Becht, even with the stats, I think it was affected by the weather, was really, really clutch, made crucial throws at the right moments, had 2 absolute dimes for touchdowns down the field. And this Iowa State offense, I think, is in good hands. Now, the receivers did not impress me. That concern certainly holds. Too many drops from receivers and tight ends, but I do think that tight end room is really good. I mean, they go 4 deep over there with Miller, Alexander, and then the top 2, obviously, and Brahmer, who, looked pretty good off of injury last year, and then Gabe Burkle. Now, we need to talk about the takeover in the fourth quarter of Carson Hansen. See, he didn't get a whole lot of run early. They were trying to spring Abu Sama loose, kind of like he did 2 years ago against Kansas State, and it really didn't work out that way. And I was kind of wondering, I'm like, why is Carson Hansen not getting as much run? And then they gave him the rock a lot and called his number a lot in the fourth quarter. It's like, oh, they were saving him. They were wanting him to be the closer. He put on a performance. I know he's suspended in baseball, but he put on a performance like Clase did. So it's like, all right, that was a heck of a closing performance for Carson Hansen as a running back, getting 5-6 yards of pop. And I also love the fact that Iowa State their offensive line and their tight ends were able to wear down that stout front seven of Kansas State to where it seemed like they were getting tired at the end of the game. So props to Iowa State for a great game plan on offense, factoring in the weather and all this stuff. The sloppiness, obviously, there were 6 fumbles, 4 fumbles lost in the first half. It definitely got better throughout the game. But I do want to talk about Avery Johnson, because was this game Avery Johnson's fault? How much weight is on Avery Johnson's shoulders from this loss? And he did start off sloppy, but he made plays when he needed to. When they were down 7-0 on, I believe it was a 3rd down, he did have a rushing touchdown where he looks very athletic. He also had a couple of big-time throws down the field, a touchdown, 65 yards to Jaron Bradley, hit a touchdown to Jace Brown. I mean, Avery Johnson was not the problem. So what was the problem with Kansas State's offense? It was Matt Wells. The play calling, I thought, was terrible. The first half game plan, I thought, was terrible. They didn't trust Avery Johnson in the first half. Then when they let it loose, because they kind of had to, Avery Johnson showed what he could do. And then that 4th down, I thought Avery Johnson might have gotten it. But at the end of the day, I don't know why you're running a predictable quarterback sweep with not too much lead blockers there. Why won't you just put the ball in the hands of your stud quarterback and let him make a play where he has an option to throw the football, instead of just trying to pound a yard with your quarterback that, even though he's athletic, quick, he's not necessarily a guy that's going to lower the shoulder and earn a first down like that. He's going to lose a fight with a linebacker or a safety. So Matt Wells, he was, I think, the biggest problem for Kansas State, and they got to figure this out offensively, because they are already behind the 8 ball. They're 0-1 in conference play. They were my pick to come out of the Big 12, and now I certainly think that they're not going to be in the college football playoff or the Big 12 championship after that performance, because I do not know how they don't lose 2 other conference games beyond this. Now, as we transition over to this matchup, that was one of the better games, or at least more fun games of the day, but should it have been? UNLV ends up surviving against Idaho State 38-31 in Vegas. And this game started off all Idaho State. They were able to drive down the field, get a field goal. They're up 3-0. All right, well, UNLV does some creative stuff with the 2 quarterbacks. They're driving down the field, and then Alex Orji fumbles it at the 1-yard line. That's recovered in the end zone by Idaho State. Just like that, it's 10-0, Idaho State. Now, UNLV did fight back. I was pretty impressed with Anthony Calandria. I thought he was a gamer. I also thought Alex Orji did respond very well after that fumble. So I think this 2-quarterback system in the offense is going to work. But my problem with UNLV here is this defense that was, in most categories, a top 30 defense in college football a year ago, looked abysmal, looked like a bottom 30 defense in college football. This Idaho State team, they are very middle of the pack in the Big Sky. They're a program that's a little bit on the rise, has been a little bit pesky, but they're not necessarily somebody who's going to be competing at the highest level in the FCS. And they were dicing them up, man. I mean, you got explosive plays, sustained drives. You had everything. And the biggest thing that killed Idaho State was self-inflicted wounds. UNLV cannot be banking on teams just completely turning the ball over and killing themselves, essentially, to win football games this year. The Mountain West is too deep. You saw what Hawaii could do. More on them in a second. I'm pretty confident that Colorado State, San Jose State, those 2 teams are going to be really solid. Of course, you got Boise State to contend with too. I am not very high right now on UNLV after what I watched yesterday, and I watched most of this game. I ended up flipping screens, but it was on my TV from 4 to 6:30, and then once the Kansas-Fresno State game turned on, it was on my phone. I was not impressed at all on UNLV, and this defense that was really good a year ago, they look like they took a huge step back. Shout out, though, to Jet Thomas. I think he's a stud running back. They need to get the ball in his hands a little bit more for my liking. How about this game? Fresno State gets absolutely destroyed in the grand opening of the new stadium over there in Lawrence, Kansas. This game also, the score could have been way worse than it was. Kansas clearly took the foot off the pedal. Jalen Daniels runs this offense to perfection. I mean, he was so efficient, so effective. The decisions that he made in RPO and the option game, and then also being able to throw the ball a little bit down the field, too. Everything was on display for this Kansas offense in the first half, and it looked so good early on. And then they, of course, ended up taking their foot off the pedal. I think they have a couple of really good running backs. LeSean Williams really showed up big time, the transfer from Iowa. And then also Daniel Highshaw, we know, is a pretty solid running back. So their answer to losing Devin Neal was a very strong answer in week 0. The biggest key for this team is their season is going to go the way that Jalen Daniels is going to take them. And what I mean by that is, can he stay healthy? I saw him take a couple of shots in yesterday's game that I did not want to see. And every single time he takes one of those hits, you hold your breath. You hold your breath. He's dynamic. He's great at extending in the pocket. When nobody was getting open, he was making plays to get somebody open or taking off and running. But I want to see him take way less hits than he did, man, because I do not want to see this guy get hurt yet again. I've hated seeing that. But overall, very impressed with the performance of the Kansas Jayhawks. Let's talk real quick. 2 cornerbacks to watch out for this Kansas team. Jalen Todd and Austin Alexander both look like studs. One's a sophomore, one's a redshirt freshman. Alexander's a freshman. Those 2 guys were locking it down on the outside. EJ Warner really had nowhere to go with the football all day long. I kind of felt bad for him in a little way. This Fresno State team, you know, the future under Matt Entz, I'm optimistic that it's going to work out. But I also don't think that this year they're going to be a very good team at all. There's a reason why at the last minute I was texting my buddies, hey, Kansas is going to dominate Fresno State. 14 is not enough. That's just, it was very clear to me what was going to happen in this game. Now, speaking of a read that I got perfect right here, Western Kentucky was a part of the Walk That Line segment at -10. I got him at -9.5 earlier in the week. Maverick McIver was very clearly going to ball out in this game. This defense was always a concern for Sam Houston. I thought that their secondary was going to be even a bigger concern. And I also just don't trust Phil Longo at all as a head coach. He hasn't been a head coach since, 2005 or something like that. And that was at LaSalle, who no longer has a football program. So this was his first chance back. I have not liked him as an OC or just as a leader of a unit, let alone leader of a team. I think that this is an incredible downgrade from what they had in Casey Keeler, who I think is a really good coach that took them to 10 wins a year ago. And they still lost by 17 to Western Kentucky last year. They lose by 17 again. And I was very impressed with Maverick McIver, airing it out, over 400 yards passing. Finally, it was a little bit of a slow start, but eventually got going with these wide receivers, whether it was Jairus Mack, the Charlotte transfer, the Western Illinois transfer, Matthew Henry, or if it was Musa Berry or anybody else. I mean, they looked good. In that true freshman running back, Parrish, he looks like a stud. I can't wait to track him the rest of the season. But yeah, this Sam Houston State team, they have significant limitations on offense. I mean, their wide receivers did not get open whatsoever, especially in the second half. They could run the ball, but Phil Longo got away from that way too much. The stupid air cat stuff. I mean, their identity has been able to be ground and pound and use your quarterback's legs with Hunter Watson there. And they got something going to start the second half with Alton McCaskill, and they decided to go away from it. And they quit on it too soon. Not to mention, if I remember correctly, wasn't Phil Longo using timeouts under 2 minutes, down by 17? That was annoying. But yeah, Western Kentucky was clearly the better team, pulling away like they did after letting Sam Houston off of a scoop and score, take a 24-20 lead, scoring the final 21 points of this game. Beautiful closeout. Great first game for Tyson Helton's squad. And then the nightcap, you had Hawaii with the walk-off field goal against Stanford to win. This game was very fun to watch, but it was also very ugly when it came to the Stanford offense. Now, this Stanford defense looks pretty solid, And they looked solid too without their best corner, Colin Wright, playing in the game. You saw Matt Rose. He played great. Mitch Lieber also played great. They were getting a pass rush and just getting in the face of Micah Alejado. And that's where I really want to start is with Micah Alejado. He looked pretty sharp for the most part. It took him a second to get going. That scoop and score touchdown or the fumble in the end zone for a touchdown. That was a bad moment, but the response when they had that touchdown drive, I'm like, all right, Hawaii is here. They're ready to go. Micah Alejado is here. And they were consistently starting to move the ball down the field a little bit. Then in the third quarter, Micah Alejado twists his ankle. It looked bad. It looked really bad. And he ends up coming back out and limping around, looking like Jake Hayner against UCLA, just carried this team. Now, I don't want to say carry because I think the defense did make that crucial interception by the defensive end who was pass rushing on Gulbranson, ended up recognizing the play and getting a huge interception that really saved this game. That was big. But Micah Alejado was really clutch. He had the touchdown drive to tie the game up and led this team right down the field to win the game. Frank Reich's time management at the end of the game, they had all 3 timeouts. It was very clear that Hawaii was wanting to sit on the field goal. They did take a shot to the end zone, but after that shot, they ran the ball a couple of times. They were just trying to kick a field goal as time expires, and Frank Reich didn't use any of the timeouts. They were counting on a missed field goal from a guy who already drilled 2 around similar range. And sure enough, they lose, taking home 3 timeouts on a walk-off field goal. I thought that was horrible game management by Frank Reich. And the other thing, too, is for all of you people out there who prop up the NFL and tell me that these NFL coaches are much better than college coaches, baloney. Because Timmy Chang, this forever college guy running in a run and shoe offense, just outcoached Frank Reich. And this leads me to another thing too. So Stanford's offense clearly has limitations. They're not very good at wide receiver. They have a really good tight end in Sam Roush, but from a receiving end, he did not look overly impressive. And Ben Gulbranson also has significant limitations. Like, this offense is not really going to be clicking. The best that they were going to run the football all year was probably yesterday's game. They are not going to play a worse run defense than that and a less built run defense. But the change in identity for Stanford got me curious with how everything played out with Troy Taylor. They didn't have his back. They reacted very quickly. They were very quick with it. And then the whole time, the broadcast was just talking about how Andrew Luck and Frank Reich all offseason was just saying that they want to change identity. Now, whether or not you like Troy Taylor's identity or not, doesn't this feel like it was a little bit of a witch hunt? That there's not a whole lot of evidence of history of wrongdoing by Troy Taylor of what he was accused of. He was accused of it, and he absolutely denies it now. It was supposedly a situation that just was blown out of proportion or just didn't happen and was completely fabricated. And it reminds me a little bit, and if that conspiracy is true, that they were just trying to push Troy Taylor out of town, Andrew Luck specifically was, that situation is going on in a very similar light to their crosstown rival. But the only difference is they're handling it, if that conspiracy is true, with a lot more professionalism. Ron Rivera does not agree and does not align with the way that Justin Wilcox over at Cal is running the program. But they're still giving him the shot. They still want to see whether or not he can succeed. And at the end of the day, this situation now, when you're getting GMs involved in these college football programs, it has been the case where the head coach has been the GM in college football, and it has worked for a lot of these smaller programs. Well, it's very clearly not working for Stanford. They look like a disaster, and I do not see it getting much better throughout the season. All right, as we move on, I want to talk about the best offensive and best defensive performance. My best offensive performance goes to Western Kentucky's Maverick McIver. He was dicing it up. He got better as the game went on. He was using the running back. He was using many receivers. He looked sharp, looked like the next great statistical Western Kentucky quarterback. Maverick McIver is my week 0 offensive player of the week. And defensive player of the week, I'm going with safety from Iowa State, Marcus Neal Jr. His stats were not super gaudy, but he was everywhere, man. He was absolutely everywhere, making an impact on every single play, it seemed like, in the second half. I thought he played outstanding. Comment down below your thoughts on these games, and make sure if you've made it this far to click that thumbs up button so that way somebody else can see this video. With that being said, we're going to jump into next week in the next video. I'll see you guys when we do that. You have a good rest of your Sunday.